The 12 Hours of Sebring was epic this year, and following the race, there is a lot to break down. Sebring definitely had some memorable moments that will be talked about across the rest of the season, and there was many storylines heading into this race that were finalized during the event. From success for certain teams to disappointment for others, this is a race recap of the 73rd edition of the Mobile One 12 Hours of Sebring that took place in 2025. Once again, the traditional 4 qualifying sessions set up the race, and for the second time in a row, BMW M Team RLL and Dries Vanthoor would qualify on pole position in GTP, which gave BMW a good opportunity to achieve victory for the 3rd time. With the number 24 BMW set to lead the field to green in the flagship category, IMSA's other classes would be led by the following entries. The number 11 Oracle 7 from TDS Racing would start from pole in LMP2, while Ferrari would headline both GT classes, the number 81 Dragon Speed car in GTD Pro, and the number 21 AF Corsa 296 in GTD. For the beginning of the iconic 12 Hours of Sebring, it would be Dries Vanthoor continuing to hold on to the lead in the number 24 BMW, and he would be followed by the number 60 Acura and the 2 Porsche Penskes. The big loser at the start in GTP was the number 5 Mustang sampling Porsche, which dropped from 5th on the grid to 12th place, just ahead of the new Aston Martin Valkyrie. So there were no incidents at turn 1 for either of the prototype or GT grids, but there was a clash a few corners later between the number 70 Inception Ferrari and the number 13 AWA Corvette, which sent the Daytona winning Corvette into a spin. Later on, the first caution period was brought out for an incident in LMP2, and this was between the number 88 PCOM racing car and the number 18 Era Motorsports entry. While it was an unfortunate setback for both entries, both the cars would continue in the race though. On the restart, up at the front, Dries Vanthoor built up an almost 2-second gap to the GTP field, but behind, Nasser and Jaminet showed competitive pace aboard the 2 Porsche Penskes, which were in 2nd and 3rd following Jaminet's overtake on the number 60 Acura. But then, drama would soon follow for the race-leading car, as Vanthoor would get a drive-through penalty for changing lanes at the start, which would therefore drop the number 24 BMW to the very back of GTP, which was just so unfortunate for the Rahal Letterman Lanigan racing team, and this definitely hurt their chances at taking the win. Following the BMW's disappearance from the front of the grid, it would be the 2 Porsches that would take over the lead, followed by the 2 Meyershank Racing Acuras and the number 40 Wayne Taylor Racing Cadillac completing the top 5, and soon the Porsches and Acuras broke away from the rest of the field and built up a sizable gap. Then there was trouble for another leader, this time in the GTD class, as the number 21 Ferrari with pole sitter Alessandro Pierguidi in the car spun while in the lead of this event. Thankfully, the AF Corsa entry didn't get damaged from the off-track moment and wasn't out of the race, but they did lose the lead, and they lost a lot of time to the other entries. Therefore, taking over at the front in GT Daytona would be the 2 Mercedes entries, from Korthoff Competition Motors and Windward Racing respectively, with Jack Hawksworth also in the mix for the leading positions in the number 12 Lexus. Unfortunately, more drama would follow for Ferrari in GTD, as our first major crash happened with Charles Gardina behind the wheel of the 023 Triarsi Competizione Ferrari. The driver was thankfully okay from the incident, but the car was out, and this would become our first retirement from the race. Depending how you perceive it, the number 10 WTR Cadillac was involved, with race control giving a penalty to the V-Series R. This was a controversial decision from race control though, as according to Ricky Taylor, who was the driver of the Cadillac, he didn't touch the Ferrari at all, even if it seemed that way from the perspective of the footage. There were definitely a lot of opinions on the incident, so I won't say more, but maybe you can clarify your opinion on what happened and if Ricky's penalty was justified in the comments below. Moving on, and because of the caution period and different strategies taking place, This mixed up the order and actually cycled the number 63 Lamborghini with Romain Grosjean behind the wheel to the overall lead in GTP, and he was followed by the number 31 Whelen Cadillac and the number 40 Wayne Taylor Cadillac behind. However, on the restart, drama struck for Lamborghini as the SC63 tumbled from first down to last in the flagship category. According to a statement from Lamborghini, this was because of, quote, a miscommunication between the pitbox and Grosjean. This was super unfortunate, especially for a car that looked somewhat competitive compared to the previous rounds, and being up at the front would have certainly helped the Italian manufacturer's race. Taking over in the lead in GTP was 2023 winner here Jack Aiken, as the number 31 Whelen Cadillac now led overall. Over to the brand new entry in GTP, the Aston Martin Valkyrie AMR LMH, and so far the car was running really good when it came to reliability, and surprisingly was showing some decent pace as well. After having a difficult WEC debut at the Qatar 1812 kilometer, this was turning out to be a great IMSA debut for the brand new Aston Martin Le Mans hypercar from the Heart of Racing squad. Back to the field of GTD Pro, and during this time there was an intense battle going on for the leading positions. Holding on to first in the category was Alessio Picariello in the Rexy Porsche, but AO Racing had tough competition behind, as Neil Verhagen especially was putting a lot of pressure to try and get past Rexy to move into the lead in the number 1 Paul Miller Racing BMW, but ultimately Picariello held the M4 behind, at least at this point in the race. The next retirement came in LMP2 as a big incident happened for the number 18 Era Motorsports car at Sunset Bend, which forced the entry out of the event. The Era Motorsports team unfortunately would have a very difficult time out on track at Sebring this year. First the contact with PCOM Racing's entry at the beginning, and now this. It was just truly a bad day for Era Motorsports in general, and hopefully they'll come back stronger in the next event. With just over 8 hours to go, it was Nico Pino who was the driver on a charge. The Chilean racer was moving up the grid in the number 5 Mustang sampling Porsche from Proton Competition, as he overtook Matt Campbell in the number 6 Porsche for 5th place, and then overtook the number 25 BMW of Robin Freins for 4th later on. The fact was, the number 5 black and gold Porsche was flying at this point in the race, and Proton was looking for a decent amount of points, especially at this event, considering that this was their last race in GTP till the end of June at Watkins Glen. To the disappointment of many, one of the biggest losers at this event was Wayne Taylor Racing. The Indiana-based squad were having a completely different race compared to last year when they won it overall with Acura. As I mentioned before, the number 10 Cadillac would have a penalty, and would also have a throttle sensor issue later on, while the number 40 Cadillac from the team would crash with Brendan Hartley behind the wheel at Sunset Bend, and eventually both of the Cadillacs would go multiple laps down. Clearly for the former winners of this event, it wasn't their day, but hopefully Wayne Taylor Racing will bounce back stronger with both of their Cadillacs at Long Beach next month. Another team in IMSA's flagship category that had a difficult race was Automobili Lamborghini Squadra Corse, as despite the Riley-run SC63 showing some competitive pace in the early stages, the number 63 Lamborghini was forced to retire from this race with around 3 hours to go due to an exhaust issue. So it definitely wasn't the result that Lamborghini were looking for, but hopefully they bounce back stronger on their next IMSA visit to GTP at Watkins Glen. Meanwhile, with under 4 hours to go, Whelen Engineering and Cadillac's lead shrunk, and eventually the number 31 car with Frederick Vesti behind the wheel lost the lead to Porsche Penske Motorsport, as Lawrence Vantor moved the number 7 car into first, with a great move heading towards the hairpin. But later on, the lead would change hands once again, with Vesti reclaiming it for Action Express Racing. Keeping with GTP, and we would have some drama in the pit lane for 2 of the entries, as Meyershank Racing accidentally released the number 60 car into the path of the number 24 BMW. This gave the Acura and the BMW major damage, and completely destroyed both of their chances at taking victory. This was definitely unfortunate for both cars, as the number 60 Acura was in the fight for the win, and the pole-sitting number 24 BMW had just got back in the fight after its early drive-through, and was also in contention for the win. Following the pit lane drama, the top 5 in GTP would now look like this with around 3 hours to go. Frederick Vesti would continue to lead in the number 31 Whelen Cadillac, followed by the 2 Porsche Penske 963s, then came the number 93 Meyer-Shank Racing Acura, with the number 25 BMW from Team RLL rounding off the top 5. Soon there would be a problem for another GTP entry, this time the number 85 Porsche, when JDC Miller Motorsports needed to change the rotor as seen by the black dust appearing on the all-yellow 963. This lost the team an entire lap to the other cars, and eventually forced the number 85 Porsche to finish down the order. Over in GTD, bad luck kept hitting the pole-sitting number 21 AF Corsa Ferrari, as this time French driver Lilou Wadu had to stop the car on track, and eventually the 296 would retire with engine issues. So after a really promising day in qualifying where they got pole position, race day just didn't go to plan for AF Corsa. As the race progressed, a scary incident happened at Sunset Bend when Casper Stevenson spun the number 27 Heart of Racing Aston Martin, and the Vantage was stopped at a point where cars approaching were blind to the stopped entry. Stevenson had to make a risky move when turning around the 27 Aston Martin, and thankfully he was successful in getting the car heading in the right direction. But like I said, it was still a very risky situation, as he had to drive backwards into oncoming traffic. With some entries having issues in GTD, like the 21 Ferrari and 27 Aston Martin as I mentioned, up at the front, the battle was mainly between Mercedes and Lexus for the win. When it came to Vasser Sullivan Racing, the number 12 Lexus crew were looking to get a victory for the team. But on the other side of the garage, it turned out to be a terrible event for the number 14 GTD Pro Lexus, as the entry, which won the event last year, had to retire with suspension issues, which by the way is a common occurrence here because of the track service. Meanwhile, at the top in GTD Pro, the win was between 4 different car manufacturers. Ford, Chevrolet, BMW, and Porsche all had a good opportunity to win this race. Oh, and by the way, considering where the Mustangs were in qualifying, this race was unexpectedly turning out to be a great event for Multimatic Motorsports, with both entries in contention for the win. Right after a restart from an earlier caution period, a big crash happened at the final turn from Matthias Paris Compact, as he went wide and hit the wall, which therefore forced the number 88 PCOM racing car to retire from the race. During the nighttime hours, as always, the action heated up, and with just over 2 hours remaining, Nick Tandy in the number 7 Porsche made the move for the lead, driving to the inside of Vesti's 31 Cadillac at Sunset Bend, and successfully pulling off the move. The Whelen Cadillac eventually moved down to 4th, as following Tandy's move in the 7, Campbell got the number 6 Porsche into 2nd, with the number 93 Acura slipping by as well. During the final hour, we actually didn't get as much chaos compared to previous events here, and in fact, the only caution period that came out was for a discarded tire on the race course that proved to be problematic and potentially dangerous for the entries out on track. Despite Nick Yololi in the number 93 Acura trying his hardest to get past Jaminet in the number 6 Porsche, which was in 2nd, the top 3 class winners were pretty much decided in the top 3 categories, but one class in particular was left unfinished: GTD. The battle in IMSA's secondary GT class was heating up between Mercedes and Lexus. Out in front, it was Jack Hawksworth in the number 12 Vasser Sullivan RCF GT3, with Philip Ellis behind in the 57 Windward Mercedes, and he was putting pressure on the Lexus for the win. After a great defense by Hawksworth, which saw him keep the lead from the Windward Mercedes, unfortunately the number 3 Corvette got in the way of the Lexus, which gave Ellis an opportunity to pass, and with a bold and aggressive overtake, he successfully got ahead of Hawksworth to take the lead for Windward Racing, and ultimately the Lexus wouldn't challenge the AMG GT3 following the overtake. But in the final stint of this race, nobody would challenge Felipe Nasr, as for the second time this year, he would be the driver to cross the checkered flag in first, as Porsche Penske Motorsport would win the 12 Hours of Sebring in 2025, which continues the dominant season Porsche are having so far in IMSA GTP. The German manufacturer would also secure a 1-2 result at Sebring, with the number 7 Porsche 963 winning the race overall, with drivers Felipe Nasr, Nick Tandy, and Lawrence Vanthoor winning, which now means that the number 7 car, along with the team and brand, have now secured overall victory at both Daytona and Sebring. The 2025 win also marks Porsche's 19th overall victory at Sebring, and their first in 17 years, with the last win also coming from Porsche Penske, when they won in 2008 with the RS Spyder, and interestingly, the car that won that race also used the number 7. Meanwhile, Nick Tandy continues to make history with his self-proclaimed Tandy Slam, as he now is the only driver in history to win the Big Six endurance races out there, as he has now won Le Mans, Daytona, Nürburgring, Spa, Petit Le Mans, and Sebring overall. Tandy is also the first driver to win the Triple Crown of endurance racing in 15 years, with his wins of Le Mans, Daytona, and Sebring, with Timo Bernard being the last driver to achieve this result. Back to the results, and with the number 6 Porsche 963 finishing in second to complete the 1-2 result for Porsche Penske Motorsport, completing the podium would be the number 93 Acura from Meyershank Racing, while the number 31 Whelen Cadillac and the number 25 BMW would complete the top 5 in GTP. Speaking of IMSA's main prototype class, I have to mention Aston Martin, as the Heart of Racing team actually had a very good race, with the number 23 Valkyrie AMR LMH actually surviving to the end of the event, and the car driven by Roman DeAngelis, Ross Gunn, and Alex Riberas actually finished in the points as well, finishing in 9th overall. So it certainly was a decent debut for the new Le Mans hypercar in IMSA, and hopefully as the season progresses, Aston Martin will pick up some more points in GTP. Over in LMP2, victory at Sebring will be claimed for the very first time by inter-Europol competition, and the number 43 Orica 07 car, with drivers Tom Dillman, Bajoy Garg, and Jeremy Clark taking the win. By the way, shout out to Jeremy Clark, what a result for his first IMSA race. To win on debut is pretty special, especially against a highly competitive field of LMP2 entries and at the incredible Sebring International Raceway. In the final stages of this race, Tower Motorsports aim to repeat their success from 2023 and get redemption to what happened to them at Daytona. But ultimately, they just lost out, but the number 8 car would still finish in second. Completing the podium would be the pole-sitting number 11 TDS racing car, with the number 74 Riley and the number 2 United Autosports entries completing the top 5. Meanwhile, the GTD Pro win would go to Rexy and AO Racing, as the team pulled off a fantastic performance, with drivers Lauren Heinrich, Klaus Bachler, and Alessio Picariello driving the number 77 Porsche to victory lane for the first time at Sebring. In the professional GT category, it would be a double podium for BMW and Paul Miller Racing, after a great race from the team, with the number 48 car finishing in second, placed ahead of the number 1 car in third. Meanwhile, pole sitters Dragon Speed would get their best result to date in GTD Pro, as their number 81 Ferrari finished in 4th, with the number 64 Multimatic Ford completing the top 5. Philip Ellis and Windward Racing would successfully hold on to the lead, as their team and Mercedes would take home the win at Sebring for the second consecutive year in GTD, and driving the car to victory lane would be Philip Ellis, Indy Dontje, and Russell Ward. Second place in GT Daytona would go to the number 12 Lexus, and I'm sure that Vassar Sullivan Racing were disappointed after losing the lead in the final hour, but hopefully they'll bounce back stronger at Long Beach. Then, completing the GTD podium would be the number 27 Aston Martin from the Heart of Racing team, and the Vantage GT3 would be followed by the number 70 Inception Racing Ferrari, which had a decent race after starting from the back, with the number 120 Wright Motorsports Porsche completing the top 5 in this category. For the championship standings heading out of Sebring in GTP, it's a Porsche Penske 1-2, as the number 7 car leads away with 760 points, followed by the number 6. Then comes the 2 Acuras from Meyershank Racing, with the 60 ahead of the number 93 Acura. And finally, completing the top 5 is the number 10 Wayne Taylor Racing Cadillac. In LMP2, the championship is very close, with the number 74 Riley leading away with 645 points, and that car is ahead by 2 points to that Daytona winning number 22 United Autosports entry. Then comes the Sebring winning number 43 Inter-Europol car in third, which is followed by the number 11 TDS Racing Orica, with the number 52 PR1 Matheson Motorsports entry placing in 5th in the championship. And by the way, we won't be seeing the LMP2 cars for quite some time. The next race for these entries will be the next Michelin Endurance Cup round, which is at Watkins Glen in June. GTD Pro continues to be headed by the number 65 Ford Mustang by Multimatic Motorsports, which has 653 points. That entry is followed by Rexy, the number 77 AO Racing Porsche in second, with the number 1 Paul Miller Racing BMW in third. Then comes the number 64 Ford Mustang, which is followed by the number 3 Corvette in 5th for Pratt Miller Motorsports. Finally, in GTD, following their win at Sebring, Windward Racing is back on top in the standings with 690 points for the number 57 Mercedes, while the number 27 Heart of Racing Aston Martin is in second after a double podium finish at Daytona and Sebring. Then, following the Vantage, is the 120 Wright Motorsports Porsche, the Daytona winning number 13 Corvette from AWA, and finally, the number 96 Turner Motorsports BMW rounds off the top 5 in GT Daytona. So that completes the race recap of the 2025 edition of the Mobil 1 12 Hours of Sebring. Once again, another action-packed event in Florida, and now it's off to the West Coast for the next event at Long Beach in Southern California. Until next time, Sebring, for those interested in endurance racing, I suggest subscribing if you haven't already, because I provide consistent updates on everything WEC, IMSA, and Intercontinental GT. For more videos to watch, check out the options displayed on screen. But for now, that's it from me. Thanks for watching.